About a month ago, I made a video explaining the mechanics behind the first 3 Five Nights at Freddy's games, and how skilled players used those mechanics to bring the games to their absolute limits. To tell you the truth, the reason why the video wasn't longer was because I just thought that the rest of the games didn't have that much in terms of interesting topics to cover, and I was just wrong. And I decided to leave it up to you guys whether or not I would make a part 2. Needless to say, the response on the first video was overwhelmingly positive, and I thank all of you for that, so why don't I just give you guys exactly what you want? If you've been on the channel before, welcome back, and if not, hello. My name is Minaxa, and today I'm going to be talking about how players perfected FNAF custom nights again. Now, I shouldn't have to say this, but make sure you watch the first video first. You'll be missing out on a lot of things that the first 3 games had to offer, and I'm gonna assume a lot of base level knowledge that video explains. Alright, FNAF 4 is pretty similar to FNAF 3 in the sense that it doesn't exactly have a custom night, but rather a challenge, or in this case challenges, that come after the main portion of the game. These challenges are Blind Mode, Mad Freddy, Insta Foxy, and All Nightmare. There's also Night 8, which is basically just a harder Night 7, and is the game's 420 mode equivalent. I'm gonna go ahead and start by explaining the game's base mechanics, and then we can apply that to the actual challenges. Five Nights at Freddy's 4 is the first Five Nights at Freddy's game to not have a visible map. However, there is still a very specific layout in this game, with many different positions various animatronics can fill. Also similar to previous games, the animatronics function on intervals and AI levels that determine their movement opportunities. If you don't understand what any of that means, then you ignored me when I told you to go watch the first video first. I'm gonna break down the animatronics behavior individually, since this game fixes a problem that Five Nights at Freddy's 2 has, where most characters function similarly and rather plainly. To dive a little deeper into how they work, we can start with Bonnie and Chica. Their movement opportunities can occur every 5 seconds. Once they are at the door, you must listen for a breathing audio cue and shut the door until you hear deep footsteps indicating that they have walked away. If they are at the door for 20 seconds, minus whatever number night you're on, they'll jump scare you when you next check the bed. Foxy's mechanics while in the halls are pretty similar. He starts in the same place as the other 2 and also has 5-second intervals for movement opportunities. However, unlike the other 2, he can go down either hall. He has 2 specific audio cues that you can listen for in the center of the room to determine where he is. If you catch him with your flashlight, he backs off, and you should ideally continue this loop for as long as possible to prevent him from entering the room. Once he does enter the room, his mechanics shift entirely. From there, Foxy utilizes a progress bar ranging from 0 to 10 that slowly rises. He has different visuals for certain ranges of the progress that tell you how close he is to jump scaring you, which occurs at 10 progress. Like the previous 2, his difficulty also increases throughout the night. Funnily enough, despite his movement opportunity occurring every time on 10 or above AI level, it still goes up higher on later nights. Freddy, like Foxy, also has a progress bar ranging from 0 to 80. His interval is 4 seconds and not 5. For the first 30 units of the progress bar, each 10 progress will spawn a Freddle on the bed maxing at 3. They progressively get louder depending on how many are on the bed, and you can hear them from other points in the room. Once you reach 60 progress, you're dead. Thankfully, shining the flashlight decreases the progress very quickly. Fredbear and Nightmare act very similarly to each other. Fredbear is present for the entirety of Night 5 and from 4 to 6 AM on Night 6, with Nightmare only appearing from 4 to 6 AM on Nights 7 and 8. Fredbear's interval is 3 seconds instead of 5, with Nightmare's being 2. You can hear them traversing the living room, but they'll enter the 2 halls silently and jump scare you after certain amounts of time, which get harsher as nights progress. Aside from this, their actual mechanics mostly involve taking the roles of the other 4 animatronics, as they can appear on both sides of the room, in the closet, and on the bed. They teleport to the bed or closet if they've been in a hall for 10 seconds and you go to check the opposite hall. There is a little bit of RNG to this, and often they will play a laugh sound when teleporting, but they can also make fake laughs that give you false information. And that's the basic breakdown of the mechanics of each individual animatronic. Now, most of that information was taken from It's Taken's very comprehensive breakdown on FNAF 4's AI, of which I omitted a lot of specific details for brevity's sake. If you want an even better understanding, go and check out that video as well. With all of that out of the way, we can begin to actually discuss the gameplay. There's a number of funny exploits that have been used for the main nights of FNAF 4. For one thing, a player named Chicken Ninja 42 beat every night from 1 through 7 without any sound. The main idea behind this is to just try checking every point of danger as quickly as possible so as to avoid the need for the sound cues on the left and right sides. On top of that, paying especially close attention to balancing every threat's intervals and getting lucky also plays a massive part.
Yes! Yes! Oh my god!
A user named Braden, who I will be referencing extensively in this video because he personally helped me quite a bit with writing, also found a strategy for Night 5 that allows you to beat Fredbear without using either side door. The strategy only works if you allow Fredbear to fail a few movement opportunities on purpose, otherwise you probably won't be successful. Let me read an example situation that Braden would come up with in his description. If he moves to the left hall, I would wait for 3 more movement opportunities to pass, then start counting to 10 for the teleport timer. At about 6, I would then run to the opposite door to teleport him inside the room and wait at the door until the full 10 seconds. This is done so that if he happens to succeed the first movement opportunity, you stop his regular timer before you die, but you also don't force him in too early in case he failed 3 movement opportunities. This will not work if he fails 4 in a row, but if you tried to account for 4, you'd probably die if he happened to succeed the first. So I had to settle for 3 when creating the strategy. Similarly to modern strategies for FNAF 2's 10-20 mode, a timer is utilized to make sure that the intervals can be kept track of properly. After that, it's just a matter of not messing up, and you can beat Fredbear without ever using a door. Moving on to 420 mode, the first person to beat Night 8 was a user named Dinky Dana. The completion was only a day after the game's release, but it should be noted that Dinky Dana was one of the few people who were on Scott's VIP list at the time and got access to the game a little earlier than most. The thing I find most interesting about this run is what he says at 3:25.
I'm wondering if it's going to change at 4 a.m. like the other nights.
This means he didn't even know for sure that Nightmare would be showing up at 4 a.m. because no one else had time to show it. Lo and behold, come 4 a.m., he does appear. Then it's just a matter of clutching it out for the next 2 hours.
Yes, we just beat a Night 8! 420 mode, we beat it 6 a.m., we beat Night 8. Oh my gosh, we got all 4 stars. You can actually get...
The main thing to note from this very first completion of 420 mode is that he let Foxy in ridiculously early on into the night. In reality, it's possible to keep Foxy out of the room for the entire night, as long as you manage his sound cues alongside the other animatronics you have to worry about. To be quite honest, managing Foxy correctly was just about the only major optimization that 420 mode really got, at least for the most part. Where FNAF 4 really gets fun is in its other challenges, which can be stacked upon each other to form even harder gameplay. Blind mode forces you to rely on only your ears and awareness to play the game. Mad Freddy halves Freddy's interval from 4 down to 2, Insta Foxy and All Nightmare are rather self-explanatory. Funnily enough, All Nightmare is actually considered easier than most of these other challenges being stacked upon each other, so considering that, you may be able to guess that FNAF 4's hardest possible challenge is Blind Mode, Mad Freddy, Insta-Foxy, on Nightmare Mode, or Night 7. The first person to beat this challenge was none other than DJ Sturf, an iconic figure in the Max Mode community and FNAF community in general who I talked about in the previous video. This was done on the Halloween patch for FNAF 4, which makes mostly visual changes aside from the mangle ambient noise that plays for the entire night. Another minor thing to note is that, although it isn't shown in this video, he does complete the Fun with Nightmare Balloon Boy minigame to skip the first hour of gameplay entirely, which you should obviously do. To someone who didn't understand FNAF 4 very well going into this video, a blind mode challenge probably seemed a bit ridiculous to you, but the audio cues are definitely more important than the visual information in this game. That being said, that doesn't mean that it's easy when the visual information is totally absent. The reason why this challenge is so hard is mainly because of Foxy, or in this case, Mangle. If you remember what I said for 420 mode, the ideal strategy is to keep Foxy out of the room for as long as possible, but Insta-Foxy makes that impossible. So the second best thing is to be able to manage him by seeing what stage his progress is on, which is also impossible because you're blind. On top of that, Mad Freddy makes the attention that you'd want to give to Foxy spread even thinner than it otherwise would have been. Overall, the circumstances formulate a deadly combo that makes Foxy the biggest problem.
Yeah, left. Just close it. Oh! Okay, we got it. That's the last one. That's number 6. That was by far the hardest. Oh my goodness.
If we fast forward to a few years ago, strategies for this challenge had gotten a little more specific in what you should do so as to give as much success as possible. Ideally, you should visit the closet and hold the doors shut on Foxy for 7 seconds immediately upon beginning the challenge. It's also recommended to keep your cursor in the center of the room when leaving the bed so that you don't accidentally perform an unintended action, because you hardly have time to make silly mistakes like that. It's also recommended that a timer is used not necessarily to keep track of the intervals, but more simply to keep track of the night itself. FNAF 4's nights are 6 minutes long, 1 for every hour. So by the time you get to 4 minutes, you'll know exactly when you need to shift your focus to dealing with Nightmare. With regard to his fake laughs, they're kind of an unfortunate RNG point of the challenge. You can minimize your chance of dying by always checking the bed first and then the closet, because it takes less time to do that, but either way, it's still kind of a matter of getting lucky. There is a way to reduce luck, however. Not for Nightmare, but for everyone else. You see, around December of last year, Brayden, who I mentioned before, did a demonstration of a strategy made by a user named Ace. This strategy is capable of eliminating all luck and making the first 4 hours impossible to die on if done correctly. How is this possible? If you guessed it involved a timer, you have a sharp intuition. The way this strategy works involves the intervals. However, unlike the other games we've talked about before, there is a set pattern you can utilize in your route to eliminate any chance for RNG. The steps go like this. Start the timer as soon as the loading screen vanishes and immediately head to the left door and flash it. From there, get rid of the frettles in the bed and then rush to the closet for Foxy. At this point, your timer should be at 11 seconds. Then close the door for 7 seconds until you hit 18. Then flash the frettles again until 21 seconds and run to the left door again. This is just the initial setup. If the setup was done correctly, the left door should be reached for the second time by 25 seconds. Just after it crosses 25 seconds, which should be on that 5-second interval, by quickly closing, reopening, and closing the door again, you can then safely flash the hallway at 30 seconds. Then repeat the same on the right side as it crosses 35 seconds and flash at 40. then run back to the middle to complete a full cycle of the route. The timings from here should be consistent until 4 AM, and it seems like an in-game hour is about a cycle and a half of this route. The reason why this works for Freddy and Foxy is simple, since it's just a matter of giving them the right amount of attention. But what about the other two? Apparently, whenever you close the door on Bonnie or Chica when they're in the middle position of their progression, the game forces them to show up at your door, and they can't be reset if this happens. However, if you just close, reopen, and reclose, the game forces them to be pushed back like you'd normally want them to be, which makes them consistent, thus making everything consistent. Because this strategy standardizes basically every aspect of the gameplay, you could technically beat this with blind mode and no sound. However, that still leaves a massive nightmare-shaped elephant in the room. You can't really standardize Nightmare's gameplay if you have zero information. It's just not possible. So far, nobody has beaten the entire night with blind mode and no sound, since it's kind of just dumb luck and no one wants to try that because it wouldn't be that fun. Though it is technically possible. To this day, that's where we stand as far as challenges in Five Nights at Freddy's 4 goes. Now we can move on to Sister Location. Five Nights at Freddy's Sister Location came out on October 7th, 2016, and it was entirely far more ambitious from every FNAF game that came before it, choosing to have different gameplay every night and have a lot of free-roaming aspects. However, there was a secret ending that could be accessed by going to the private room on night 5, which is more commonly known as Private Room or Ennard Boss Fight. The Ennard Boss Fight is the first time we get to experience conventional FNAF gameplay since FNAF 3. The night is a ridiculous 9 minutes long, and the power goes down at a rate of 13.8% per hour, leaving you with only 17.2% for your own use. If you guessed that this night was going to have green runs, you'd be absolutely correct. The map layout is pretty simple, and there's no quirky mechanics to deal with. It's just you and Ennard. Being that he is the only animatronic you're meant to deal with, his behavior is actually pretty interesting. He doesn't begin moving until 40 seconds into the night, and from there, he begins movement opportunities on 10-second intervals. From 1 to 3 AM, they shorten to 6-second intervals. At 4 AM, they shorten to 4, and down to 2 in that final hour. He generally has sound cues for when he moves, but can move silently and mislead you on where he really is, similar to Fredbear and Nightmare in FNAF 4. This is to make sure that the cameras aren't redundant, I assume, but they should still be used sparingly so you don't waste power. If you were to run out, his movement opportunities would decrease to every half second. Though, if it's any consolation, his movement opportunities have a 50-50 chance of succeeding regardless of any other factor throughout the night, so you could still survive if you were close enough to the end. As far as I know, the history of the Green Run records on this night started on August 26, 2021, with a player named Kaylin achieving an 8% tied PB run. From this point forward, she would carry every single Green Run world record on the Ennard Boss Fight to this day. But how was it done? Well, at this point, it should be no surprise that a stopwatch is used to monitor his intervals. On top of that, since the map is rather small and you will usually get very specific audio cues, you can do what you'd do in FNAF 3 and 4 and keep track of where the animatronic is in your head. However, since his movement opportunities function on 50-50 chances, there is quite a bit of RNG dictating where he'll actually end up at what time, which translates to how well a green run can go. In instances where he moves into either the left or right closet, he's guaranteed to go up to the door on the next movement opportunity. There is also a position invisible to cameras that he starts in and often returns to when his route is reset by being denied office entry. It's also worth noting that using a controller or playing on a PlayStation 4 is actually significantly easier because you can use the D-pad to close the doors rather than hovering over and clicking the buttons in the office. The main things that really suck about attempting this specific green run are the 50/50s on movement opportunities and the sheer length of the night. For most of it, you're just going to be sitting and staring at a timer, hoping that an unfortunate series of silent movements isn't about to kill your green run. Because of this, it's easy to understand how the first of these green runs could be only 8%, but gradually get improved over time to 14% within just a few weeks. Then, Kalen achieved the current world record almost 2 years ago now, 15.8%, only 1.4% off of the theoretical perfect green run. And to this day, that's where the Ennard boss fight green run stands. There's one more thing that I can briefly show off related to this, just because I think it's cool. So, 6 months ago, DJ Surf was able to beat the night without using the camera at all. Basically, it just requires getting lucky with not having silent movements through the doors. It's not particularly impressive compared to the high-level green runs. I just thought it was neat and worth mentioning.
It worked. What was my power left? Oh my goodness.
Now we can move on to the big stuff, the Custom Night DLC. Sister Location's Custom Night DLC was released on December 1st, 2016, about 2 months after the original game. Just like FNAF 2, the hardest challenge was this game's version of 1020 mode. Also like FNAF 2, it's useful to separate the threats into categories just so you know exactly what you're dealing with, but before I tell you about the categories, I'll go ahead and talk about how they all work in great detail. Ballora operates on sound cues to tell you which side of the office she's near and how close to the door she is. She has a counter that gets set to 50 every time she moves, which goes down by 1 every 0.2 seconds. Once her AI level is greater than or equal to this counter, she moves again. At 4 AM, 5 will be added to her AI value, with an additional 5 being added at 5 AM. Funtime Freddy also has sound cues on the sides of the office, and he will send Bonbon into your office through the door if it's open. His counter is set to 30 at 10 seconds into the night, or once he switches sides, which goes down by 1 every second. Similarly to Ballora, once this counter is greater than or equal to the AI level, he will switch sides again. At every 3-second interval, a random number from 0 to 39 is picked, and if Freddy's AI is greater than or equal to it for at least 250 frames since the last movement occurred, he will send Bonbon, which has a 2 out of 3 chance to be on the same side as Freddy, and a 1 out of 3 chance to be on the opposite side. Compared to that, Yendo is pretty simple, drawing a number between 1 and 25 every time the camera is flipped. If the AI is greater than or equal to that number, he will drain 1 oxygen every 20 milliseconds and kill you after 100 minus the AI level times 2 frames. Funtime Foxy has a counter that gets set between 40 and 50 when viewing Cam 7, along with a timer for when he leaves. Every quarter second, 1 is subtracted from this value, and if the counter is less than his AI level, he will advance in his progression by 1 stage, and that counter will re-randomize. He will attempt to attack when the timer reaches a value lower than his AI level. Once Foxy leaves, he will knock on the right door once 5 seconds has passed. If he's thwarted successfully, his timer will be set to a random value between 30 and 40, 1% of your power will be stolen, and his progression value will be reset to a number between 0 and 1. Bonnet is another simple one. Similarly to Yendo, a number between 0 and 30 is drawn and compared to her AI level when the cameras are flipped. If her AI is greater, she will appear, and you must click on her nose before she finishes advancing to the left side of the screen. Bidybab functions on 3-second intervals, at the end of which a number between 0 through 49 is drawn and compared to her AI level. If that value is greater, she will advance by a stage. Her final stage will be reset if the vent door is closed on an attempted office entry. Similarly to Ballora, her AI will increase by 5 at 4 AM and 5 again at 5 AM. Electrobab will advance towards the closet in Cam 4 with a counter being set to 30 every time this advancement is done, or when you shock them to go away. Every second this counter goes down by 1, and when that counter becomes less than or equal to their AI level, they will appear. Every 5 seconds, 1% of your power will be drained, but the entire process is reset if you give them a controlled shock. Minarina has near identical AI to Electrobab with a counter set to 30 that goes down by 1 every second that acts once it becomes less than or equal to their AI level. However, the action that gets done here is a progression by 1 stage, which resets their counter. Every stage makes them drain 1 oxygen, but at increasing speeds. Stage 1 is 0.5 seconds, Stage 2 is 0.25 seconds, then 0.1 seconds, 0.07 seconds, and every subsequent stage is 0.05 seconds until a controlled shock resets them to stage 0. Minarena 2 is another copy and paste of Yendo and Bonnet's AI, but instead it adds 1 Minarena to your screen in the office until there are 5 of them, which do not go away. Finally, we have Lolbit, who serves as a superficial distraction which can be dissuaded by typing LOL onto your keyboard during gameplay. On 3-second intervals, a number between 0 and 49 is drawn and compared to his AI level. If it is greater and the LOL keys have not been pressed within the last 5 seconds, he will appear on the first monitor. After 150 minus the AI level times 3 frames from that moment, he will appear on monitor 2. And after the same amount of time, he'll appear on monitor 3, and after that, if he's allowed to fully progress, his logo, which covers your screen, will appear and automatically go away after 400 frames. And that is a very detailed explanation of how every animatronic in this mode works. So how do we categorize them? Well, the easy one is office animatronics, which are Bonnet, Yendo, Lolbit, and Minarena 2. Then you have sound cue animatronics like Ballora, Freddy, and Bidybab. Then you can easily categorize the 2 shock animatronics into one set, and finally you're left with Foxy, who almost always needs to be quirky and different in the games that he's in. Individually, even just groups of these threats are pretty overwhelming for newer players, but altogether it makes for straight up sensory overload. Funnily enough, though, once you do learn what's going on, it's probably one of the most consistent and least luck-based of all of the max modes. As proof of this, it only took the challenge's first victor, Hippozilla, 30 minutes to beat after having practiced on the... wait a minute, old version? I'll get to that in a bit. Since power is a pretty constrained resource on this night, the main strategy involved keeping your camera on Foxy for most of the night and switching to the closet cams to get rid of the ones that drained power and oxygen when necessary. Foxy's camera is absolutely essential here because you need to know pretty quickly when he's left. Aside from that, the challenge is mostly about being skilled at dealing with the threats individually and bringing it all together, and doing it for 6 minutes. As a quick fun fact, a user named Insta has actually beaten this mode at 200% speed. It has certain advantages and disadvantages. For one thing, the night is only half as long, and the game goes so fast that sometimes Funtime Freddy's attacks may cancel themselves out. However, Bonnet is super fast, Funtime Foxy needs to be checked every 2 seconds, Lolbit appears more frequently, Bidybab is super fast in the vents, and Yendo only gives you a 0.75 second window before straight up killing you. It's pretty damn absurd, but it was done.
Come on. Yes! 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 Oh my god. It took me too much time. Jesus Christ.
They thought I was you.
Holy crap, it took me too much time.
So what about that old version that I mentioned a bit ago? Well, on December 2nd, Scott would unlock Golden Freddy mode in an update for the Custom Night DLC. He himself had managed to beat it on the first few difficulty presets, but the very hard difficulty, which was 1020 mode, he said he couldn't even get past 1 AM on. This was the pre-patch version of Sister Location's Custom Night. The update that released on December 3rd would add a bit more power to 1020 mode and also added the secret cutscene you received for beating it, and only then was anyone actually able to complete the challenge. Because this game had some mechanics that ran on frames similar to Foxy in FNAF 1, there were people who beat the pre-patch 1020 with frame rate manipulation that allowed them to have more power than they normally would have. That trick could also be used to achieve insane green runs, but none of these were counted as legitimate completions for obvious reasons. Months would pass, and those months turned into a year, and then it just kept going. Nobody would dare to even attempt it because of how difficult it was. Until Zombie Gabriel came along.
Hey YouTube, Zombie Gables here, and today I'd like to bring you my completion of Old 1020, the very first in the Five Nights at Freddy's community, and the only one probably for a while, because this is absolutely insane, said impossible by the creator himself, and has finally been proven wrong. I'm able to predict it. That's so good. I'm gonna really hope I didn't lose power there, because if I did, 10 runs down. Or maybe I'm really far behind. That was close. Oh my god. I just did the hardest thing in the FNAF community. No way.
This was a monumental achievement. To put into perspective how hard this challenge really is, Zombie Gabriel only had 1% power remaining. In the past few years, a newer strategy to increase your screen gamma has been used so that the oxygen depletion from the min-arenas could become an irrelevant factor, since it doesn't actually turn your screen completely black for whatever reason. A lot of people decided to use the strategy, and a lot of other people decided not to use the strategy, as it's definitely leaning towards being a cheese strat. After averaging the remaining power from many successful runs that would come after it, I calculated that the average power remaining in the run often would be about 0.42%, with every run ending on either 1 or on a 0% blackout. Knowing this, it should go without saying that doing green runs on this version without frame manipulation is just straight up impossible. So I'll go ahead and talk about post-patch green runs instead. Actually, I lied. On January 7th, 2022, Shooter25 uploaded a 4% green run of the pre-patch challenge. This time, a timer and the gamma strat were being combined so that the gameplay could be as efficient as possible. The timer would make it so that inputs could be performed more precisely for the animatronics that ran on intervals, but when you're doing it at this level, it basically becomes a Ballora and Bidybab RNG fest. The next day, while aiming for a 5% run, he'd get a crazy 7% run instead. Funnily enough, DJ Sturf had theorized this wasn't even humanly possible. About half a year later, Bulon would get an 8% run, then 9% on November 1st of that same year. Then finally, on May 18th, 2023, the current green run record for the pre-patch challenge happened, a 10% run. According to them, 11% is the realistic human limit for this challenge, and 13% is the theoretical max. The same runner also has the post-patch world record, which stands at 24%, and that should probably show you just how difficult pre-patch really is. So, Pizzeria Simulator, it doesn't have a custom night, right? But theoretically, there are still plenty of factors that you could consider to make a hard challenge. If you have all salvages, all ads, no upgrades, and limit yourself to not using any of your tools, you arrive at the hardest Saturday, which is what I'll be talking about in this section. For anyone unfamiliar with the game's mechanics, the goal of the office sections in Pizzeria Simulator is to complete a set of obligatory tasks on a computer in front of you. In total, these tasks take about 129 seconds with no upgrades, but this is only under ideal circumstances, because unfortunately, to your left and right are big-ass vents that make up a complicated system of rooms for the animatronics to roam in as they slowly inch towards you. Just like previous games, the animatronics function on intervals and movement opportunities. The movement opportunity in this game is always a 1 in 3 chance, but the intervals shorten between different days, going from 8 seconds on Monday all the way down to 2 seconds on Saturday. A special monotony timer forces intervals to 2 seconds after 30 seconds of no movement and 1 second after 45. The biggest issue with the gameplay is that many activities will increase your sound risk, that is, your percent chance of being heard by an animatronic. If an animatronic has wandered into either vent beside you and you're not shining a flashlight at them, you receive a guaranteed jump scare sentence. Making zero noise would be ideal, and the upgrades and tools help you minimize noise in your tasks as you progress through the game, but you're not allowed to use those in this challenge. This game also introduces a temperature mechanic, which kills you automatically at 120 degrees Fahrenheit and goes up while using the computer. As if that weren't enough, each of the 4 ads has a 25% chance to play loud, blaring music for 5 seconds every 20 seconds. Thankfully, if an ad has played once throughout the night, it won't play again, kind of like the phantoms on Nightmare Mode in FNAF 3. And if they overlap, then the one that didn't show also counts towards that clause. So, what's the strategy for this? Well, the funny thing about Pizzeria Simulator's office gameplay is that unlike every other FNAF game, it has no time limit. You could theoretically play for as long as you wanted. So, if you want to know what the strategy is, after doing some math, I determined that only about 16% of this run's length was spent actually performing the tasks. The other 84% is spent camping the vents in near-death situations. Although you can overlap tasks with camping the vents as well, this cannot be done if one of the animatronics is too close, or they'd certainly hear and jump scare you. After 13.5 minutes of mind-numbing gameplay, Shooter would complete Pizzeria Simulator's hardest Saturday. So that last one was a bit shorter and more straightforward, but I figured it would still be worth talking about. In fact, there's a lot of things I didn't know about Five Nights at Freddy's 1 through 3 when I made the first video that I think are worth talking about now. So to end this video, I'm gonna do a more fast-paced bonus section covering the things I missed in those first 3 games. So, using this incredibly precisely timed sequence that involves Foxy's jump scare, you can soft lock Five Nights at Freddy's 1 in a way that lets you beat the night without using any cameras. You can also use this same trick to get the theoretical best possible green run on 420 mode, which is 28.7%. Since it is a completely unintended bug and not just a gameplay exploit, it's not really valid in competitive discussion, but it is a cool thing that exists. You can also beat 420 mode without using the lights at all, which is only possible because of this interval timer put together by Shooter. The same idea is utilized to beat 420 mode whilst stalling Freddy on the stage for the entire night. After 15 plus hours of attempts, Shooter was able to beat 420 mode using the original Big Bug strat with 3% power remaining. This, of course, means that no movement opportunity exploits could be performed, the camera must be set to Pirate's Cove, and the right door needs to be closed on every camera check once Freddy is in the corner.
Wait.
Oh my god.
Let's go!
Oh my god! What?
That was almost 4%.
Now, Five Nights at Freddy's 2. Just a few weeks ago, a new strategy for 1020 was discovered called the -3 strat, and it's kind of insane. The strategy was first beaten by Insta. As crazy as it might sound, it gets its name from the fact that it takes 3 animatronics out of the equation entirely. There is a glitch that tricks the game into thinking you are watching 2 cameras at once. Normally this would be useless since you only get to actually see one of them. However, Withered Freddy, Withered Chica, and Withered Bonnie are stalled if you're viewing the parts and service room. So this strategy removes them from the night entirely, giving you significantly more free time to wind the music box, and turning Toy Bonnie into more of a good thing since he allows you to get rid of any other toys in the vents.
There we go. GG. Oh my god, that's so much easier. Let's go.
Finally, we have Five Nights at Freddy's 3. True player beat aggressive nightmare mode whilst getting every single phantom jump scare. How this is possible is beyond me. Freddy Game player was able to beat aggressive nightmare mode with a ventilation error for the entire night, which is pretty heavily RNG based, but does have a strategy that involves keeping Springtrap as far away as possible and manually tracking him through the vents and cameras.
Yes! Yes!
Insta was able to beat aggressive nightmare mode with 0 errors, which is basically just playing it normally but very safely. Still pretty impressive.
I just did NAO no errors with Springtrap in my office at 4 a.m. This is my 3rd time.
Finally, Brayden was able to beat aggressive nightmare mode with no audio lures and without Freddy Game player's strategy that I talked about in the previous video. He did this by getting really lucky with Springtrap, spending the majority of the night roaming around and not actually making any major advancements past Cam 2. Every time he attempted to go into a vent, it was denied and he just kept roaming around randomly. This lasted somehow until almost 5 a.m. From there, it was a matter of stalling for as long as possible, which he did by resetting the ventilation and just kind of sitting there until he finally won. Now, I'm sure all of you are probably wondering about the one game that I left out. Here's the thing. Ultimate Custom Night is very complicated. It could probably make for an hour-long video on its own, but I will cut you guys a deal. I know it's a lot, but if you can get this video to 50,000 likes, I promise you that I will make the best Ultimate Custom Night video you've ever seen. If you had a good time, it would mean the world if you subscribed for more content like this and turned on post notifications so you never miss a video. If you want to support me further, $5 channel members get early access to new videos, and you can also follow my socials and join the community Discord server. And with all that being said, that's gonna be all from me. I hope you enjoyed the video. Until next time.